Imagine a world where the color of your skin dictates the limits of your dreams, where opportunity is a distant hope rather than a lived reality. In the sweltering heat of Annes Bay, Jamaica, on August 17, 1887, a child was born who would challenge that very reality. That child was Marcus Garvey. And from the very beginning, his life was intertwined with the struggles of his people. Growing up in a society shaped by the lingering shadows of slavery and colonial rule, Garvey witnessed firsthand the harsh inequities that black people faced daily. The injustice was not abstract, it was tangible, felt in the classrooms, on the streets, and in the labor fields where fairness was a foreign concept. From a young age, Marcus developed a deep awareness of these inequalities. He observed how his neighbors, friends, and even family members were constrained by systemic oppression, and he began to ask questions that many adults around him would avoid. How could people who had been robbed of their freedom generations ago still endure such treatment? Why were the achievements of black individuals ignored, or worse, dismissed as insignificant? These questions ignited a spark within him, a spark that would grow into an unyielding flame of determination. Marcus was not content to accept the world as it was. He had an insatiable curiosity and a profound sense of justice. His early experiences of racial heartbreak, like being excluded from friendships or opportunities simply because of his skin color, were formative. They instilled in him the conviction that change was not just necessary, it was inevitable, if people were willing to fight for it. This mindset would define the trajectory of his life and lay the groundwork for the revolutionary ideas he would later share with the world. Marcus Garvey's journey was not only about confronting oppression, but also about envisioning a future where black people could stand proud, self-sufficient, and united. He dreamed of a world where the African diaspora would reclaim its cultural heritage, establish economic independence, and assert political influence. Even as a child, the seeds of these revolutionary ideas were taking root in his mind, fueled by the stories of resilience and resistance that surrounded him. Today, we celebrate Marcus Garvey not just as a historical figure, but as a visionary whose life continues to inspire generations. His story reminds us that courage, vision, and unwavering commitment can spark movements that change the course of history. If you are ready to explore the remarkable life of Marcus Garvey, to understand how a single individual can influence the world, do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that empowers and enlightens. Join us as we dive deep into the extraordinary journey of a man who refused to be silenced and whose legacy continues to resonate around the globe. By the age of 14, Marcus Garvey's world had already begun to reveal both its beauty and its cruelty, a duality that would shape the very core of his vision for black empowerment. Living in Annes Bay, he had grown accustomed to observing the subtleties of racial injustice. But it was during this pivotal year that the stark realities of oppression struck him with a clarity that would never fade. He experienced personal heartbreak when someone he had considered a close friend, a girl who had grown up alongside him, was sent away to school abroad, instructed by her family never to write or correspond with him again. A cruel reminder of the invisible barriers that society had erected between people simply because of the color of their skin. The emotional sting of exclusion cut deep, leaving a young Marcus grappling with questions that extended far beyond childhood disappointment. Questions that pierced into the fabric of society itself. Why must human connection be dictated by racial hierarchies? And why should talent, kindness, or character ever be overshadowed by the superficial measure of skin? These early experiences planted seeds of introspection that would germinate into a lifelong commitment to justice, dignity, and pride for his people. Not long after this personal reckoning, Marcus' eyes were opened to a broader landscape of oppression when he traveled to Central America. There, he witnessed the grueling exploitation of African laborers on plantations, a vivid tableau of hardship that illuminated the entrenched economic and social inequalities faced by black people across the globe. From dawn to dusk, men and women toiled under the scorching sun, their backs bent beneath the weight of physical labor, while the fruits of their work enriched foreign overseers who rarely acknowledged their humanity. The young Garvey was struck by the stark contrast between the sweat and suffering of these laborers and the disregard with which they were treated by those who profited from their labor, a disparity that resonated painfully with the injustices he had already observed at home. Every groan of fatigue, every exhausted step, every whispered plea for fairness became for him more than a mere observation. They became a call to action, a tangible manifestation of the inequities that his future mission would seek to address. In witnessing this suffering, Marcus began to understand the profound connection between economic independence and personal dignity. He realized that the exploitation he saw in Central America was not isolated. It was part of a global system that systematically undermined black agency, reinforcing dependence and subordination through both overt and subtle means. The laborer's plight crystallized for him a vision of empowerment that extended far beyond mere survival, one that emphasized self-reliance, education, cultural pride, and collective action. He understood that true liberation required more than fleeting political victories. It demanded a reimagining of societal structures, a reclamation of cultural identity, and a deliberate construction of institutions that would allow black people to thrive economically, socially, and spiritually. It was during this formative period that Marcus's sense of justice transformed into a purposeful vision for leadership, not leadership born of ego or ambition, but of necessity and moral imperative. He began to conceive of a world in which black people, dispersed and often marginalized, could unite around shared principles of dignity and mutual respect, forging institutions that would protect their interests and elevate their communities. The experiences of heartbreak and observation of labor exploitation were not merely personal trials. They were mirrors reflecting the systemic conditions that required change, and they honed Marcus' understanding of the stakes involved in fighting for empowerment. He recognized the urgency of cultivating a mindset of self-worth and agency, not only for himself but for an entire generation of people whose potential had long been constrained by centuries of oppression. These experiences also instilled in Marcus a resilience and determination that would define his later life. He absorbed lessons in perseverance from the laborers who continued their work despite exhaustion and mistreatment, internalizing the idea that strength, patience, and vision could coexist with action, and that transformative change demanded both strategic planning and unwavering commitment. The heartbreak he endured and the injustices he witnessed fueled a growing conviction that black people deserved more than mere token recognition. They deserved to shape their destinies, celebrate their heritage, and cultivate the economic and social structures that would enable lasting empowerment. From this crucible of youthful pain and first-hand observation of systemic exploitation, Marcus Garvey began to forge the philosophical and practical foundations of a movement that would later span continents, inspiring countless individuals to embrace their identity and fight for justice with pride and determination. Through this lens, it becomes clear that Marcus Garvey's adolescence was not a time of idle reflection, but a period of intense engagement with the realities of the world around him. His heartbreak and the scenes of labor exploitation were intertwined, teaching him that personal suffering and collective oppression were inseparable, and that addressing one required confronting the other. These formative encounters provided the blueprint for his later endeavors, the establishment of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the creation of economic programs designed to foster self-sufficiency, and the tireless advocacy for African unity and pride. The experiences at 14 were not isolated episodes, but the beginning of a continuum, shaping a consciousness that would challenge governments, societies, and individuals to recognize the inherent dignity and potential of black people everywhere. It is this blend of personal experience, acute observation, and moral clarity that set Marcus Garvey apart as a visionary from a remarkably young age. By intertwining his own emotional journey with a broader awareness of systemic oppression, he developed an understanding of empowerment that was holistic, encompassing personal pride, a communal solidarity, and economic and cultural advancement. This period in his life demonstrates that leadership is often forged in the crucible of adversity, and that the seeds of global movements can be planted in the fertile ground of youthful insight and moral courage. Marcus's journey at 14, marked by both heartbreak and revelation, became the foundation upon which he would build a lifetime of advocacy, innovation, and inspiration for generations to come, proving that the struggles of a single youth can ignite the enduring flame of a transformative movement. As Marcus Garvey matured, the experiences of his youth, the heartbreak, the injustice, and the vivid images of laborers suffering in distant lands coalesced into a vision that was as ambitious as it was revolutionary. He understood that the empowerment of black people required more than awareness or individual resilience. It required a collective movement, a structured organization that could unite people across borders and backgrounds under a shared purpose and identity. With this understanding firmly rooted in his consciousness, Garvey set out to build something monumental, something that would serve as both a beacon and a vehicle for change. That vision materialized in the form of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA, an organization born not from mere aspiration but from the urgent necessity to empower a people whose potential had long been suppressed and whose achievements had too often gone unrecognized. The UNIA was more than an organization. It was a philosophy made tangible, a living, breathing institution designed to foster African unity, instill pride in heritage, and cultivate self-reliance. Marcus envisioned a network that transcended national boundaries, a community in which African descendants around the world could find common cause, mutual support, and inspiration. In his pride was not a passive sentiment but an active force, a catalyst that could transform individuals and communities alike. He believed that by embracing their cultural roots, black people could cultivate an inner strength that would serve as the foundation for both personal growth and collective advancement, a philosophy that resonated deeply with those who had long been marginalized, overlooked, or underestimated by mainstream society. Garvey poured his intellect, charisma, and indomitable energy into the creation and expansion of the UNIA. Recruiting members, establishing chapters, and delivering speeches that electrified audiences from Harlem to Kingston, from London to the Caribbean. Each address he gave was meticulously crafted, blending historical insight with contemporary urgency, inspiring listeners to see themselves not merely as individuals struggling in isolation, but as part of a broader movement capable of shaping the future. He emphasized that self-respect and self-sufficiency were inseparable. Pride without practical action would be hollow, while economic and social advancement without cultural grounding would lack direction and sustainability. The UNIA's programs reflected this philosophy, encompassing education, business development, and community-building initiatives, all aimed at equipping members with the tools and confidence needed to claim their rightful place in the world. Within the UNIA, Garvey instilled a sense of discipline, purpose, and shared responsibility that made the organization both formidable and inspirational. Members were encouraged to take ownership of their communities, to support one another, and to envision a world in which African-descended people could thrive on their own terms, free from the limitations imposed by centuries of oppression. The organization was a vehicle for empowerment, a structured platform that allowed individual talents to contribute to a collective vision, reinforcing the principle that unity was strength and that every achievement, however small, was a step toward larger liberation. Garvey's insistence on self-reliance extended beyond the abstract. It was reflected in tangible efforts such as the establishment of businesses, investment ventures, and cultural initiatives that not only demonstrated the potential of black enterprise, but also provided practical models for economic independence. The impact of the UNIA extended far beyond its immediate membership. Through newsletters, newspapers, and public events, the organization disseminated messages of hope, pride, and actionable guidance, reaching audiences who might never have had direct contact with Garvey or his leadership. By cultivating a global network, Garvey ensured that the principles of the UNIA could resonate across continents, offering a shared identity and purpose to people scattered by colonialism, slavery, and systemic discrimination. The association's reach was extraordinary for its time, creating a sense of interconnectedness among African-descended populations that had often been fragmented and isolated, and fostering a collective consciousness that emphasized shared history, shared struggle, and shared potential. Garvey's vision for the UNIA also emphasized the importance of cultural affirmation, celebrating African heritage as a source of strength and pride. He encouraged members to learn about their history, to embrace their traditions, and to honor their ancestors not merely as figures of the past, but as living symbols of resilience and achievement. By integrating cultural pride with economic and social initiatives, the UNIA created a holistic model of empowerment that addressed the mind, the spirit, and the material circumstances of black people. This approach was both innovative and necessary, offering a blueprint for self-determination that contrasted sharply with the prevailing narratives of dependency and marginalization. The establishment of the UNIA marked a turning point in the struggle for black empowerment, transforming Garvey from a visionary thinker into a leader whose ideas had practical, far-reaching impact. His efforts demonstrated that meaningful change required organization, strategy, and unwavering commitment, and that the liberation of a people was inseparable from their ability to assert control over their economic, social, and cultural lives. Under Garvey's guidance, the UNIA became a movement that inspired pride, promoted unity, and fostered self-reliance, creating a legacy that would influence generations to come. By linking the lessons of his youth with his experiences abroad, and by channeling both personal conviction and collective ambition into structured action, Marcus Garvey laid the foundation for a transformative movement that transcended borders, defied expectations, and illuminated the possibilities inherent in a united, empowered, and self-determined African diaspora. Long before the phrase "Black is beautiful" became a rallying cry during the 1960s civil rights movement, Marcus Garvey was already planting the seeds of this powerful philosophy in the hearts and minds of African-descended people across the globe, nurturing a sense of pride and self-worth that transcended borders, generations, and social circumstances. It was not merely a slogan for Garvey. It was a declaration of identity, a call to recognize and celebrate the intrinsic value of black life, culture, and appearance at a time when society systematically sought to denigrate it. Growing up in Jamaica, a young Marcus had observed the subtle and overt ways in which black people were made to feel inferior. From the educational system that often marginalized their achievements to the social structures that limited their mobility and scope of influence. These formative experiences instilled in him a determination to challenge prevailing narratives and to replace shame with empowerment, invisibility with recognition, and despair with hope. Garvey's vision of cultural pride extended far beyond superficial appearances. It was a holistic philosophy that intertwined heritage, self-respect, and purpose. He understood that for African Americans, and indeed for all people of African descent, embracing one's physical features, natural hair, and traditional customs was not only a form of personal validation, but also a radical act of resistance against centuries of systemic oppression. In public speeches, writings, and organized gatherings, he encouraged individuals to take pride in their skin, their features, and their lineage, highlighting the richness of African history, the intellectual achievements of past civilizations, and the resilience embedded in their cultural traditions. He urged black men and women alike to reject imposed standards of beauty that elevated Eurocentric ideals while devaluing their own heritage, emphasizing that true liberation began within the mind and spirit as much as it did in social and political structures. For women in particular, Garvey's message was revolutionary. In a society that often relegated black women to the roles of domestic workers, seamstresses, or subservient figures, he emphasized their inherent beauty and worth, challenging them to embrace their identity with confidence and dignity. He promoted the idea that black women were not only deserving of self-respect, but also capable of contributing to the advancement of their communities through leadership, education, and cultural affirmation. By advocating for self-love and cultural pride, he provided a framework for empowerment that addressed both societal constraints and internalized perceptions of inferiority, demonstrating that the journey toward liberation was as much about self-recognition as it was about collective action. Garvey's advocacy of black is beautiful also found expression in practical initiatives, particularly through the Universal Negro Improvement Association (UNIA). The organization became a platform for cultural celebration and education, fostering a sense of community where individuals could witness the strength, creativity, and potential inherent in their peers. Ceremonies, parades, and meetings were not merely organizational rituals, they were public affirmations of identity, spaces where African-descended people could see themselves represented with dignity, authority, and pride. Through these events, Garvey communicated the message that embracing one's heritage was not a passive acknowledgement of ancestry but an active, empowering choice that could transform how individuals engaged with the world and how society perceived them. In addition to his speeches and organizational work, Garvey used media strategically to propagate his message of pride and empowerment. Publications such as the Negro World carried articles, illustrations, and editorials that celebrated African achievements, highlighted exemplary figures, and promoted the idea that cultural heritage was a source of strength. Through these platforms, Garvey was able to reach audiences who might never attend a public meeting, ensuring that his philosophy of self-respect, cultural awareness, and beauty could resonate across continents, touching the lives of African-descended people from the Americas to Africa and the Caribbean. This global dissemination reinforced the notion that pride in one's identity was not limited by geography or circumstance, and that the reclamation of heritage was a universal, unifying principle. What set Garvey apart in his advocacy was the seamless integration of aesthetic pride with broader social and economic empowerment. He argued that cultural self-recognition was the foundation upon which education, business, and political activism could be built, without a sense of value and dignity in oneself and one's heritage. He contended, efforts toward advancement risked being hollow or externally defined. By placing pride in identity at the center of his vision, Garvey provided a conceptual and practical bridge between personal affirmation and collective empowerment, demonstrating that recognizing beauty in blackness was inseparable from the pursuit of social, economic, and political liberation. Garvey's vision of beauty was also forward-looking. He anticipated that the movement for civil rights and social justice would require not only strategic organization, but also psychological resilience, cultural pride, and unwavering belief in the worth of black people. By teaching that beauty and value were inherent rather than granted, he instilled confidence and hope, equipping generations to face systemic oppression with dignity and assertiveness. His influence laid the groundwork for later movements that would explicitly celebrate black aesthetics. But his contribution was foundational, pioneering a philosophy that challenged both external prejudice and internalized self-doubt decades before it became widely recognized. Through this lens, Marcus Garvey emerges not merely as a political or economic strategist but as a cultural visionary. One who understood that the liberation of a people encompasses more than laws and institutions. It includes the reclamation of self-respect, the celebration of heritage, and the recognition of inherent worth. By advocating black as beautiful long before it became a popular rallying cry, he offered a revolutionary message of empowerment, dignity, and pride that continues to inspire and resonate today, reminding us that true liberation is inseparable from embracing who we are and celebrating the richness of our collective identity. His words and actions created ripples that extended far beyond his lifetime, a testament to the enduring power of cultural affirmation and the profound impact of one individual's unwavering belief in the value and beauty of their people. Marcus Garvey's vision of empowerment extended far beyond speeches, philosophy, and cultural pride. He understood that true liberation required economic strength and the ability for African-descended people to control their own wealth, resources, and institutions. With this understanding firmly in place, he set about transforming abstract ideals into concrete initiatives that could demonstrate the feasibility and impact of black self-reliance. Central to this effort was the creation of the Black Star Line, a shipping company envisioned not merely as a business venture but as a symbol and practical instrument of economic independence for African-descended communities across the globe. The concept of the Black Star Line reflected Garvey's recognition that commerce, trade, and ownership were not simply financial matters, they were avenues for empowerment, dignity, and influence, capable of asserting a tangible presence for black enterprise in industries from which people of African descent had historically been excluded. The Black Star Line was designed to serve multiple purposes, linking economic opportunity with broader social and cultural objectives. By operating a fleet of ships under black ownership, Garvey aimed to facilitate trade between Africa, the Americas, and the Caribbean, creating employment for African-descended sailors, entrepreneurs, and laborers while simultaneously promoting international connections that could strengthen the collective identity of the diaspora. The initiative symbolized the potential for African-descended people to participate fully in global commerce, to claim a share of wealth that had long been systematically denied, and to demonstrate that collective effort could yield both practical benefits and a profound psychological impact. Each ship was not merely a vessel for goods. It was a floating representation of possibility, a testament to the vision of a people determined to define their own economic destiny. Launching the Black Star Line required extraordinary effort, coordination, and vision, as well as a willingness to confront entrenched prejudice, systemic obstacles, and skepticism both within and outside the black community. Garvey faced critics who doubted the viability of a black-owned shipping enterprise, financial challenges that tested the organization's capacity for oversight and management, and political forces that viewed such economic empowerment as threatening to established hierarchies. Yet despite these hurdles, Garvey's commitment never wavered. He worked tirelessly to inspire confidence among investors, members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and communities worldwide, emphasizing that economic self-sufficiency was as vital to liberation as cultural pride or political organization. The Black Star Line became a teaching tool, a laboratory in which the principles of business management, accountability, and entrepreneurship could be practiced and refined, fostering skills that could be applied across a spectrum of industries. Garvey's approach to business was deeply intertwined with his broader philosophy of empowerment, as he recognized that financial independence could underpin social, political, and cultural transformation. The Black Star Line was accompanied by other ventures designed to promote Black-owned enterprises and encourage investment within the community. From industrial schools to cooperative enterprises, all intended to create a self-sustaining economic ecosystem. Through these initiatives, Garvey sought to instill a sense of agency, demonstrating that African-descended people could build, manage, and benefit from their own institutions, and that success was both attainable and transformative. He emphasized the importance of internal trust, loyalty, and diligence, understanding that the viability of these ventures depended not only on external conditions, but also on the integrity and commitment of those involved. The creation of the Black Star Line and related projects also carried symbolic weight, representing a reclaiming of power that extended beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Each ship, each enterprise, each cooperative effort was a statement of intent, a visible demonstration that Black communities could organize, achieve, and control their economic futures. For many, seeing the Black Star Line in operation was inspiring, a reminder that empowerment was not merely a matter of rhetoric, but could be made real through collective effort, innovation, and disciplined action. Garvey's message was clear. Economic independence was inseparable from cultural pride, social solidarity, and political ambition, and each success, no matter the scale, contributed to the larger goal of liberation and self-determination. Despite the ambitious nature of these projects, Garvey faced numerous obstacles, including mismanagement by inexperienced personnel, sabotage, and systemic resistance from forces both internal and external to the movement. Critics highlighted failures and setbacks, often without appreciating the immense challenges inherent in attempting to establish a revolutionary enterprise in an environment shaped by centuries of exclusion and discrimination. Yet even in the face of these difficulties, Garvey's vision endured, and the lessons learned from the successes and failures of the Black Star Line informed future generations of Black entrepreneurs and leaders, demonstrating the possibilities and perils of economic self-determination. The very act of attempting such ventures sent a message to the world and to the Black community alike, that financial independence was a crucial pillar of empowerment, and that bold action, grounded in strategic vision, could create pathways for opportunity previously denied. In addition to practical outcomes, the Black Star Line and related projects served as rallying points for morale, unity, and collective identity. Communities invested emotionally as well as financially, seeing in these ventures a tangible expression of Garvey's broader philosophy, that pride in heritage, self-reliance, and communal solidarity could converge in transformative ways. The Black Star Line exemplified the interplay between idealism and pragmatism, showing that movements for social change required both visionary ideas and concrete mechanisms to implement them. By integrating commerce, culture, and community engagement, Garvey created a multidimensional approach to empowerment that was as innovative as it was audacious. Ultimately, the legacy of the Black Star Line and Garvey's other entrepreneurial endeavors lies not solely in their financial outcomes, but in their demonstration of possibility, courage, and the interconnectedness of economic, cultural, and social empowerment. Through these initiatives, Garvey illustrated that liberation was not merely a theoretical construct but a practical, achievable objective, contingent upon vision, organization, and unwavering commitment. He challenged African-descended communities to envision a world in which their labor, ingenuity, and capital could be mobilized for collective advancement, and he provided a blueprint flawed at times, ambitious, and bold for achieving such independence. The story of the Black Star Line is therefore not merely about ships or businesses. It is about a philosophy made manifest, a testament to what is possible when courage, vision, and determination converge to create pathways toward empowerment, dignity, and self-determination for generations to come. Despite the grand vision, relentless dedication, and tireless work that Marcus Garvey invested into the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Black Star Line, and his broader movement for African empowerment, he was met with an intricate web of challenges that tested both his resolve and the sustainability of his projects, revealing the immense difficulties inherent in pursuing revolutionary change in a world structured to resist it. From the outset, Garvey's initiatives faced practical obstacles in the form of mismanagement by individuals whose skills and experience were often insufficient to handle the complex financial, operational, and logistical demands of running enterprises as ambitious as the Black Star Line. While Garvey meticulously planned and provided guidance, the reality of coordinating multiple ventures across countries and continents required a level of administrative acumen and personnel loyalty that was sometimes lacking, and the consequences were felt not only in operational setbacks, but in the way the broader movement's credibility was perceived by supporters and detractors alike. These internal challenges were compounded by sabotage, both covert and overt, as opponents of Garvey's ideology, whether motivated by envy, political calculation, or outright racial animosity, sought to undermine the progress he had made. In many cases, individuals who had professed loyalty within the organization engaged in actions that compromised operations, diverted resources, or spread misinformation, creating a climate of uncertainty and distrust that complicated the pursuit of collective goals and slowed the momentum of the movement. Even as Garvey navigated these internal difficulties, external pressures intensified. Governments in both the United States and abroad were attentive to his growing influence, particularly the potential of his economic and political initiatives to inspire independent action among African-descended populations. In response, surveillance, investigation, and bureaucratic interference became persistent features of Garvey's life, with authorities scrutinizing speeches, publications, and business dealings, often under the pretext of legality, national security, or financial oversight. Agencies monitored UNIA activities meticulously, tracking membership, correspondence, and financial transactions, interpreting any ambitious plan or movement as a potential threat. This constant observation exerted psychological and operational pressure, forcing Garvey and his associates to navigate a complex landscape where trust was scarce, and any misstep could be exploited to discredit or dismantle the organization. In such a climate, the interplay between external scrutiny and internal vulnerability became an enduring challenge, highlighting the precarious nature of attempting to establish autonomous institutions under conditions of systemic hostility. Betrayal by close associates added another layer of difficulty to Garvey's journey, striking at the heart of the principles he championed and testing his leadership in profound ways. Some members who had risen through the ranks of the UNIA, or who were entrusted with significant responsibilities, failed to act in alignment with the collective mission, sometimes for personal gain, other times out of ideological disagreement, and occasionally under pressure from adversarial forces. These betrayals undermined critical operations, created setbacks in financial ventures, and complicated relationships with investors and community members, demonstrating the fragility of even the most carefully constructed initiatives when human loyalty and integrity were compromised. Garvey himself, ever principled and committed to accountability, had to contend with the painful reality that vision and intention alone could not guarantee cohesion, that the success of a movement depended as much on the character and dedication of its participants as on the genius of its leader. The combined effect of mismanagement, sabotage, and government scrutiny created scenarios in which projects like the Black Star Line faced operational and financial crises that could easily have been avoided under more favorable circumstances. Ships were delayed, Investments were mishandled, and plans for expansion or resettlement were disrupted, producing tangible frustrations for both Garvey and the broader community. Yet in the midst of these challenges, Garvey's resilience and strategic thinking remained evident. As he sought to find solutions, rally supporters, and maintain focus on the long-term objectives of unity, empowerment, and economic self-sufficiency, each setback became a learning opportunity, illustrating not only the vulnerabilities inherent in ambitious social movements, but also the necessity of vigilance, adaptability, and the cultivation of trust and competence within the ranks of leadership and operations. Moreover, Garvey's experience demonstrates how systemic resistance to black advancement could manifest through coordinated and indirect pressures, highlighting the broader socio-political context in which his movement operated. Rival factions, competing interests, and established power structures recognized the potential impact of an organized, economically empowered, and culturally confident African-descended population, and many acted deliberately to curtail it, whether through legal maneuvers, misinformation, or the manipulation of financial systems. These forces created an environment in which innovation and ambition were continuously challenged, and in which the very act of attempting self-determination was framed as a threat. For Garvey, navigating this terrain required not only tactical skill but an unshakable belief in the mission, a capacity for resilience in the face of public and private attacks, and the ability to inspire confidence in a community that could easily have been disheartened by repeated setbacks. Yet despite these formidable challenges, the narrative of sabotage, mismanagement, and surveillance also serves to underscore the extraordinary ambition, courage, and foresight of Marcus Garvey. It is a testament to his unwavering commitment that, even while facing multifaceted obstacles, he continued to advocate for black economic independence, cultural pride, and international solidarity, demonstrating that visionary leadership is inseparable from resilience and strategic adaptability. Every challenge, whether internal or external, tested the limits of his organizational skills, moral conviction, and personal stamina, but also reinforced the lessons that subsequent generations would draw from his experiences, that empowerment requires careful planning, loyal collaboration, and the ability to withstand both betrayal and systemic opposition without relinquishing the ultimate vision. In this light, the difficulties Garvey encountered do not diminish his legacy. Rather, they illuminate the extraordinary magnitude of his achievements, revealing how a single individual's courage, intellect, and perseverance could inspire a movement whose influence would echo far beyond the immediate successes and failures of his own lifetime, leaving an enduring blueprint for resilience, strategy, and unwavering commitment to collective liberation. The year 1923 marked a dark and controversial chapter in the life of Marcus Garvey, a man whose life had been devoted to the liberation, empowerment, and upliftment of African-descended peoples across the globe. As he faced charges of mail fraud that many historians and contemporaries have long considered politically motivated, a tool wielded by authorities determined to suppress his growing influence and dismantle the movement he had so tirelessly built. Garvey's initiatives, particularly the Black Star Line and other ventures of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, had placed him in a position of extraordinary visibility, empowering African-descended communities to assert economic independence, cultural pride, and political consciousness, and in doing so, he had become a target for those who perceived such empowerment as threatening to the entrenched social and racial hierarchies of the time. The charges, framed within the legal language of financial impropriety, masked a deeper fear among those in power that a unified, organized, and economically empowered black community could challenge the status quo and inspire a global movement that demanded recognition, justice, and equality, disrupting centuries of systemic oppression. The trial that followed Garvey's indictment was emblematic of the broader struggles faced by leaders challenging entrenched power structures. As courts, juries, and public opinion were influenced not only by the technicalities of law, but also by the prevailing social prejudices and political calculations that underpinned the case. Evidence presented in court, while focusing ostensibly on the sale of stock for the Black Star Line, was often interpreted through a lens that assumed malfeasance. Ignoring the broader context of Garvey's vision, the complexity of his enterprises, and the innovative, yet unprecedented, nature of establishing large-scale black-owned ventures in a society hostile to such developments, the legal proceedings unfolded under intense scrutiny, with every document, correspondence, and business decision examined and magnified, often in ways that obscured the true intent of the enterprise and amplified the perception of wrongdoing, creating an environment in which Garvey's credibility and reputation were systematically questioned. Throughout the trial, Garvey remained resolute, defending not only his own integrity, but the legitimacy of the movement he represented, articulating a vision of economic and cultural empowerment that sought to restore dignity, pride, and self-determination to African-descended peoples worldwide. His arguments underscored the central principle that the charges were not merely about isolated business practices, but were symptomatic of a broader societal discomfort with the assertion of black agency and leadership. The courtroom became a stage where the struggle for justice intersected with the struggle for recognition of a people historically denied both opportunity and respect. And every testimony, objection, and piece of evidence contributed to a narrative that extended far beyond the immediate legal questions into the realms of morality, racial politics, and the ethics of power. Garvey's conviction, ultimately handed down in 1923, did not occur in isolation, but was part of a sustained campaign to weaken his influence and curtail the momentum of the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The political motivations behind the prosecution were widely discussed among observers, scholars, and activists, who recognized that the legal system, while ostensibly impartial, was in practice deeply enmeshed with prevailing social hierarchies, racial prejudices, and international concerns regarding black mobilization and autonomy. By targeting Garvey through a legal mechanism that could be framed as a criminal case, authorities effectively undermined his ability to operate freely, sowed divisions within the movement, and discouraged potential supporters, while presenting the appearance of impartial enforcement of the law to the broader public. This tactic, combining legal pressure, public scrutiny, and social stigmatization, demonstrated the lengths to which those opposed to Pan-African activism were willing to go to maintain control and inhibit the growth of a global movement advocating for racial pride, unity, and self-determination. Despite the conviction, the impact of Garvey's work and his enduring influence could not be eradicated. The principles he espoused, unity, self-reliance, cultural pride, and economic empowerment, resonated across generations, inspiring subsequent leaders, movements, and organizations, and reinforcing the idea that attempts to suppress transformative change through legal or political maneuvering could slow, but never ultimately extinguish, the force of visionary leadership. The trial and conviction highlighted the tension between revolutionary vision and the entrenched resistance of societal structures, illustrating the sacrifices, trials, and personal costs that accompany the pursuit of justice and collective upliftment in the face of formidable opposition. Garvey's experience with the 1923 conviction also served as a profound lesson in the importance of resilience. strategic thinking, and moral clarity for leaders of social movements. While the immediate outcome was a setback, it did not diminish the validity of his vision or the inspiration it provided to millions. And the conviction has since been reevaluated by historians and legal scholars who acknowledge its questionable motivations and its place within a broader pattern of political suppression targeting influential black figures. In this sense, the episode underscores the enduring challenge of advocating for systemic change in environments resistant to equity, illustrating the need for persistence, adaptability, and unwavering commitment to principles in the face of institutionalized adversity. Marcus Garvey's 1923 conviction thus stands as both a cautionary tale and a testament to his unwavering dedication, highlighting the complex interplay of law, politics, and social change, and illuminating the sacrifices inherent in the pursuit of liberation for marginalized communities. It reflects the resilience required to maintain vision under pressure, the courage necessary to confront both overt and covert opposition, and the enduring power of ideas capable of inspiring transformation across generations. Garvey's life, in the shadow of this conviction, remains a profound illustration of the intersection between personal sacrifice and collective empowerment, demonstrating that the pursuit of justice and dignity often entails confronting systemic forces determined to resist progress. Yet that such efforts, when guided by clarity of purpose and unwavering conviction, can leave an indelible mark on history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for equality. The deportation of Marcus Garvey from the United States marked a poignant and transformative turning point in his life, representing not merely a geographical displacement but the forced cessation of his direct influence over the vibrant movement he had nurtured for years, a movement that had begun to redefine the consciousness, aspirations, and collective identity of African-descended communities across America and beyond. After the 1923 conviction on mail fraud charges, widely perceived as politically motivated, the mechanisms of the U.S. government moved swiftly to remove him from the country, a strategic action designed to curtail the momentum of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, undermine the unity he had cultivated, and neutralize the charismatic force that had inspired so many to embrace economic independence, cultural pride, and political self-determination. In the streets of Harlem, where Garvey's rallies once drew thousands, and where the ideals of Africa for the Africans and black is beautiful resonated deeply, the absence of their leader created both a vacuum and a profound sense of loss, leaving the followers of his vision to grapple with the challenges of continuing a movement whose lifeblood had been so intimately tied to his presence, energy, and unyielding advocacy. The journey back to Jamaica, precipitated by legal and governmental pressures, was far more than a simple relocation. It was a moment of introspection, reflection, and recalibration for a man who had devoted his entire adult life to the cause of racial upliftment, only to be forcibly severed from the epicenter of his efforts. Garvey's deportation was emblematic of the broader societal resistance to empowered black leadership in the early 20th century, illustrating the lengths to which established authorities would go to contain, diminish, or displace those whose ideas challenged the entrenched racial hierarchies and economic structures of the time, even in the face of removal. However, Garvey's vision could not be entirely constrained by borders. For the principles he had championed, self-reliance, cultural pride, economic empowerment, and global solidarity had already taken root among a generation of followers who continued to propagate his ideals in his absence, a testament to the enduring power of ideas over physical presence. Back in Jamaica, Garvey confronted a profoundly different environment from the bustling, racially charged streets of Harlem, yet the circumstances there allowed him to engage with his homeland in ways that were both intimate and strategic. Freed from the immediate surveillance and legal harassment of U.S. authorities, He sought to reinvigorate his message and to encourage self-determination and economic organization within Caribbean communities, extending the vision of the UNIA and its affiliated initiatives into a regional and ultimately global framework. Jamaica, with its own colonial legacies and systemic challenges, presented both opportunities and obstacles. The population was receptive to messages of empowerment and cultural pride. Yet the infrastructure, resources, and political constraints posed unique challenges that required Garvey to adapt his strategies, exercise patience, and find innovative methods to sustain engagement, build institutions, and nurture leadership from a distance. Despite the limitations imposed by deportation, Garvey continued to communicate with the United States through correspondence, publications, and supporters who remained active in the UNIA, seeking to maintain a thread of connection that bridged the physical divide and ensured that the core principles of the movement remained intact. Letters, newsletters, and speeches became vital tools for sustaining morale and strategic direction, allowing him to influence discourse and action indirectly even as the immediate intensity of his personal leadership had been curtailed. This period highlighted the interplay between resilience, adaptability, and the cultivation of decentralized leadership, demonstrating that a visionary movement could survive and evolve even in the absence of its founder's day-to-day oversight, provided that the foundational principles were deeply internalized by its adherents. Yet the emotional and psychological toll of deportation cannot be overstated. For a man whose life had been consumed by the struggle for black empowerment, the enforced separation from the communities he had galvanized was deeply wrenching. A personal sacrifice intertwined with the broader political machinations that had removed him from influence. Garvey's sense of responsibility to the millions who had invested hope, trust, and resources in his vision weighed heavily, and the challenge of guiding a movement from afar underscored the vulnerability inherent in relying on a single, central figure to inspire, coordinate, and lead transformative social change. Nevertheless, even in Garvey's commitment to education, economic development, and cultural pride remained unwavering, reflecting the resilience that had defined his entire life and the foresight to recognize that the survival of the movement depended not solely on his presence but on the empowerment of others to carry forward the mission. The deportation episode also exemplifies the broader historical pattern of how governments and power structures responded to transformative black leadership in the early 20th century, illustrating the tensions between systemic resistance and the aspirations of marginalized communities. By removing Garvey from the United States, authorities sought to sever a nexus of influence that threatened to consolidate economic power, cultural pride, and political awareness among African-descended populations, but in doing so, they inadvertently catalyzed a more widespread recognition of the importance of self-reliance, decentralization, and resilience within the movement itself. Garvey's enforced absence prompted the cultivation of local leaders, the strengthening of institutional frameworks, and the recognition that empowerment must extend beyond any single individual to become a sustained, collective endeavor. In reflecting upon Marcus Garvey's deportation, it becomes clear that while the act succeeded in ending his active leadership within the United States, it could not extinguish the principles, inspiration, and influence he had cultivated over decades of tireless work. The episode underscores the intersection of personal sacrifice, political resistance, and strategic vision, highlighting the complex dynamics faced by those who challenge entrenched systems of power. Garvey's legacy during this period demonstrates that even when a visionary leader is physically removed from the epicenter of activity, the ideas they have planted, the institutions they have built, and the sense of empowerment they have instilled in others can continue to inspire, mobilize, and transform communities, leaving a lasting imprint that transcends borders, oppression, and the immediate constraints of circumstance. Ultimately, Garvey's deportation serves as a compelling chapter in the story of a leader whose vision was too vast, too compelling, and too transformative to be confined or silenced by legal or political maneuvers, illustrating the enduring power of conviction, resilience, and the ability of a single life to influence generations long after the individual has been removed from the stage of direct leadership. Marcus Garvey's unwavering dedication to the cause of black empowerment came at an enormous personal cost, one that often remained hidden behind the public persona of a charismatic leader and tireless visionary. Yet it shaped the contours of his private life in ways that were profound and deeply affecting, touching every intimate relationship and familial bond he attempted to nurture. From the earliest years of his adult life, it was evident that Garvey's commitment to the struggle for racial pride, economic independence, and cultural liberation would demand a level of personal sacrifice few could fully comprehend. And this devotion inevitably created tension and distance in the most sacred of human connections. His marriage, brief though it was, bore the strain of relentless ambition and ceaseless responsibility. The couple's time together was measured not in leisurely afternoons or shared dreams, but in fleeting moments stolen amid a life consumed by organizing, speaking, and strategizing for the uplift of African-descended peoples across the globe. Love and companionship, while cherished in thought, were often subordinated to the pressing demands of a mission that Marcus considered nothing short of existential for his people, leaving the emotional and practical needs of his spouse largely unmet, and creating a distance that was as painful for him as it was for her. In the early months of his marriage, the pattern of devotion to cause over personal life became starkly evident, as Garvey's attention was almost entirely absorbed by the development and expansion of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the myriad initiatives it encompassed. From educational programs to economic enterprises, from cultural advocacy to international diplomacy, the very qualities that made him a magnetic and effective leader, relentless energy, visionary thinking, and an uncompromising commitment to principle were the same qualities that rendered him emotionally and physically unavailable to nurture the intimate bonds of family life. Though he sought to provide for and protect those closest to him, the practical realities of organizing a global movement, contending with entrenched systemic opposition, and navigating the complex social and political landscapes of his era meant that familial responsibilities were often deferred, postponed, or sacrificed altogether, leaving a trail of disrupted relationships in his wake. Fatherhood, in particular, became a complex and emotionally fraught domain for Garvey. His son, like many children of revolutionary figures, experienced the duality of pride and absence, witnessing a father of extraordinary influence and vision, yet rarely seeing the ordinary gestures of care, playfulness, or shared laughter that define a nurturing parental relationship. Garvey's dedication to the movement demanded long hours, extensive travel, and a constant presence in public life, and in the privacy of his home, he remained preoccupied with strategic planning, correspondence, and the demanding demands of leadership, leaving little room for the playful interactions, bedtime stories, and everyday engagements that create lasting memories between parent and child. While he sought to embody principles of integrity, diligence, and moral leadership, these virtues, enacted in the public sphere, often translated into a form of distance in the domestic sphere, and his family experienced the tension between admiration for a man of principle and the yearning for a father and husband who could also inhabit the ordinary rhythms of daily life. The emotional toll of this commitment was compounded by the persistent pressures and challenges that surrounded Garvey's work, From governmental scrutiny and societal opposition to the logistical and financial obstacles inherent in building large-scale Black-owned enterprises. The stress, intensity, and urgency of his mission created a life rhythm in which moments of domestic intimacy were repeatedly interrupted or overshadowed by the larger, public responsibilities he carried, and the private sacrifices required to maintain a global vision were often invisible to the outside world yet profoundly felt within the family. Even when he attempted to show warmth, care, or affection, these gestures were often fleeting and overshadowed by the pressing needs of a movement that demanded absolute focus, resulting in a complex emotional landscape in which love, responsibility, and ambition existed in constant negotiation and sometimes in painful tension. Yet, despite these personal hardships, Garvey never wavered in his conviction that the struggle for collective empowerment justified extraordinary personal sacrifice, and he framed his domestic challenges within a broader moral and philosophical context. The liberation and upliftment of an entire race required extraordinary commitment, and personal contentment could not supersede the imperatives of justice, pride, and autonomy. Letters, reminiscences, and accounts from those close to him reveal a man who, while aware of the costs imposed on family life, remained steadfast in his belief that the work he pursued was not merely a career or ambition, but a sacred duty with intergenerational implications. The disruption of personal life, the absence from intimate moments, and the emotional distance were, in Garvey's view, necessary burdens carried in service of a cause far greater than individual happiness. A perspective that speaks to the extraordinary discipline, vision, and moral clarity that defined his life. Moreover, these personal sacrifices illuminate a fundamental truth about leadership and transformative activism. The pursuit of systemic change, particularly in the face of entrenched oppression, often exacts profound costs from the individual, requiring difficult choices between personal desires and collective responsibility. In Garvey's life, this reality manifested most acutely within the family, where his presence, attention, and emotional availability were necessarily compromised, yet where the principles he modeled integrity, resilience, and a commitment to justice offered an enduring example of purpose and moral courage. His family, though subjected to the challenges of absence and disruption, were intimately connected to the broader narrative of struggle and uplift, bearing witness to the magnitude of vision and the extraordinary demands of leadership. In reflecting upon Garvey's personal life, it becomes clear that his sacrifices were inseparable from the broader tapestry of his achievements, illustrating the tension between public impact and private fulfillment, between the imperatives of a transformative mission and the natural human desires for connection, companionship, and familial warmth. The story of his disrupted marriage and fatherhood underscores the profound human cost of unwavering dedication to justice, offering insight into the lived realities behind the legend, and reminding us that the path of visionary leadership is often paved with both triumph and personal hardship. Marcus Garvey's life, in this light, emerges not only as a chronicle of monumental achievement and enduring influence, but also as a testament to the personal sacrifices that underlie the pursuit of collective liberation, revealing the intricate interplay between the public and private dimensions of a life devoted to the service of others, and the enduring legacy of a man whose commitment to justice and empowerment transcended even the most intimate bonds of love and family. Marcus Garvey's life and work left an indelible mark on the trajectory of Black empowerment throughout the 20th century, shaping the philosophies, strategies, and aspirations of countless movements and leaders who followed in his wake, and providing a conceptual and moral framework that would resonate through the decades, inspiring both organized activism and the personal consciousness of African-descended people around the world. The legacy he established was not merely a product of his speeches, publications, or organizations. It was the embodiment of a vision so comprehensive and compelling that it created a lineage of thought and action, one that emphasized self-determination, cultural pride, economic independence, and political awareness in ways that had rarely been articulated or mobilized at such scale before. Figures such as Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, among others, were profoundly influenced by Garvey's insistence on the dignity and potential of black people, drawing from his ideas the principles that would guide their own approaches to leadership, organization, and community uplift. Elijah Muhammad, for instance, integrated many of the foundational tenets of Garvey's philosophy into the teachings of the Nation of Islam, particularly the emphasis on racial pride, self-reliance, and the development of autonomous economic structures within black communities. Muhammad recognized in Garvey a model of disciplined, principled leadership whose life demonstrated that transformative vision must be accompanied by unyielding commitment, and the echoes of Garvey's insistence on the centrality of Africa as a source of identity and empowerment permeated the ideology that Muhammad propagated, creating a continuity between the Pan-Africanist visions of the early 20th century and the religiously infused social activism of the mid-century. Malcolm X, too, drew from Garvey's rhetoric, symbolism, and strategic insistence on self-empowerment, finding in his speeches a blueprint for articulating both the historical grievances and the potential futures of African Americans in the United States. Malcolm X's advocacy for dignity, direct action, and community-centered economic and social development bore the unmistakable imprint of Garvey's earlier work, demonstrating that the influence of a visionary can extend well beyond their lifetime and immediate sphere of activity. The inspiration Garvey provided was neither abstract nor theoretical. It was rooted in concrete strategies for transforming community consciousness and material conditions, a dual approach that combined cultural education, economic initiatives, and political organization. The UNIA, the Black Star Line, and his extensive writings served as both practical experiments and symbolic demonstrations of the capacity for African-descended people to claim agency, cultivate pride, and construct institutions that reflected their own values and aspirations. Later leaders recognized that these examples provided a roadmap for their own organizing efforts, showing that transformative action required both ideological clarity and practical implementation, and that empowerment was inseparable from self-discipline, visionary planning, and a willingness to challenge systemic barriers with ingenuity and courage. Garvey's insistence on celebrating African heritage, embracing cultural identity, and rejecting internalized inferiority created a moral and psychological foundation that subsequent leaders could build upon, making the abstract principles of pride and self-respect tangible in everyday life and actionable within communities. Moreover, Garvey's influence extended beyond organizational structures into the realm of personal identity, self-perception, and moral courage. Leaders who drew inspiration from him internalized not only his ideas but his example, a life defined by unwavering dedication, unflinching courage in the face of systemic opposition, and the capacity to endure personal sacrifice for the sake of collective advancement. This influence was evident in the oratory, activism, and strategic initiatives of 20th century figures, who frequently invoked the principles Garvey championed, adapting them to their historical contexts while retaining the essence of his vision: the empowerment of African-descended peoples through pride, unity, and autonomy. The ideological through-line connecting Garvey to these later movements illustrates the enduring power of thought leadership and the capacity of a single individual's vision to resonate across generations, shaping the contours of social and political activism in profound and lasting ways. Garvey's teachings on economic self-sufficiency, for instance, informed the development of cooperative businesses, community-owned enterprises, and local economic initiatives that became hallmarks of later black nationalist movements. Leaders understood that liberation was not merely a legal or political condition, but a material and psychological state that required the capacity to sustain communities, educate youth, and generate wealth under their own control. This multidimensional approach, emphasizing both cultural affirmation and practical capability, became a guiding principle for those who sought to build resilient institutions and nurture autonomous communities, reinforcing the lesson that empowerment requires action in both thought and practice. Equally significant was Garvey's insistence on global consciousness and Pan-African solidarity, which inspired 20th-century movements to look beyond local or national concerns and to situate African American struggles within the broader context of African liberation and diasporic unity. This perspective fostered connections between leaders, thinkers, and activists across continents, creating networks of support, exchange, and inspiration that strengthened the resolve and strategic capacity of movements committed to racial justice. By framing the struggle as both immediate and international, Garvey instilled a sense of purpose and interconnectedness that expanded the imagination of what black movements could achieve, and encouraged subsequent leaders to envision solutions that were simultaneously local and global in scope. In reflecting upon Garvey's enduring impact, it becomes clear that the measure of his influence lies not only in the organizations he founded or the speeches he delivered, but in the ways subsequent generations internalized his principles, adapted them to their circumstances, and carried forward the mission of empowerment with their own voices and initiatives. The continuity from Garvey to figures like Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X illustrates a lineage of leadership that is rooted in the inseparable relationship between pride, self-reliance, and collective action, demonstrating that visionary ideas can transcend immediate contexts and continue to shape societies long after their originator has departed from the stage. Marcus Garvey's life, then, stands as both a historical testament and a living inspiration, showing how dedication, vision, and moral courage can ignite movements that redefine identity, consciousness, and possibility for generations, leaving an indelible imprint on the ongoing story of human resilience, aspiration, and the pursuit of justice. Marcus Garvey's vision for the empowerment and unity of African-descended peoples extended far beyond the borders of the United States, encompassing a bold and unprecedented call for African repatriation and the global spread of Pan-African consciousness. A vision that he pursued with relentless energy and strategic ingenuity through the Universal Negro Improvement Association, which he built into an international network of chapters spanning over 22 countries and reaching thousands of people across continents, connecting communities from the Caribbean to North and South America, Europe, and Africa itself, in a manner that had never been attempted before, and which fundamentally reshaped the way African-descended populations viewed themselves and their place in the world. From the earliest days of the UNIA, Garvey was acutely aware that the struggle for dignity, self-determination, and cultural pride could not be confined to one city, one country, or even one hemisphere, and he sought to construct a movement whose influence would ripple outward, creating nodes of organization, education, and activism that could collectively challenge colonial domination, racial oppression, and internalized inferiority, and offer a coherent vision of empowerment that was simultaneously practical, ideological, and spiritual in nature. The concept of African repatriation, which Garvey championed as a central pillar of his philosophy, was not merely a geographic proposition, but a profoundly symbolic and strategic idea that sought to reconnect African-descended people with their ancestral homeland, instilling a sense of historical continuity, cultural pride, and moral obligation to build and defend autonomous societies in Africa. For Garvey, the promise of repatriation was a mechanism through which African-descended populations could exercise agency, demonstrate competence in governance and economic development, and create a tangible alternative to the persistent marginalization experienced under colonial and post-slavery systems, transforming the abstract ideals of liberation and self-respect into concrete, achievable objectives. This vision inspired fervent dedication among his followers, who embraced the possibility of returning to Africa not simply as an escape from oppression, but as an opportunity to actively shape the destiny of a continent and the global African diaspora, reinforcing the notion that freedom, pride, and self-determination were inseparable from the ability to act decisively and collectively. Garvey's organizational genius was critical to translating this ambitious vision into a functioning international movement. The UNIA divisions, strategically established in key cities across the Americas, Europe, and the Caribbean, served as hubs of education, enterprise, and cultural advocacy, each chapter empowered to implement programs consistent with Garvey's principles while maintaining a direct connection to the central mission and its charismatic leader. These chapters facilitated literacy campaigns, vocational training, economic cooperatives, and political advocacy, fostering a sense of self-reliance and collective purpose among members while reinforcing the shared identity of African-descended people across national and linguistic boundaries. The sheer scale and coordination of these efforts reflected Garvey's extraordinary strategic capacity, as he balanced the need for local autonomy with the coherence of a global movement, ensuring that the principles of pride, self-determination, and cultural affirmation were consistently communicated, reinforced, and operationalized. Communication was central to this global endeavor, and Garvey leveraged print media, public speeches, and organized events to disseminate his vision widely, ensuring that the ideals of African repatriation and racial empowerment reached diverse audiences. The Negro World newspaper, published in English, French, and Spanish, became a critical vehicle for spreading ideas, celebrating achievements, and connecting communities scattered across continents, demonstrating Garvey's recognition that literacy, information, and shared knowledge were indispensable tools in the struggle for liberation. Through these publications, the UNIA educated, inspired, and mobilized people who may have otherwise felt isolated, showing them that they were part of a broader, transnational movement committed to dignity, empowerment, and collective progress. The circulation of ideas across borders reinforced the notion that African identity and pride were not localized concerns but a global imperative, and that the liberation of one community was intrinsically linked to the liberation of all African-descended peoples. Garvey's emphasis on worldwide engagement also fostered political awareness and advocacy, as chapters of the UNIA participated in campaigns that challenged colonial authorities, opposed systemic discrimination, and advocated for the rights of African-descended populations wherever they resided. This aspect of the movement highlighted Garvey's understanding that empowerment was not only about cultural pride or economic independence but also about political agency, requiring members to develop a keen awareness of power dynamics, legal structures, and international relations, and to act in ways that reinforced their collective dignity and capacity for self-determination. By framing the struggle in global terms, Garvey instilled a sense of responsibility and agency that transcended local conditions, encouraging communities to see themselves as interconnected actors capable of influencing the course of history on a continental and global scale. The international spread of the UNIA also created symbolic and practical solidarity, as members witnessed the achievements and initiatives of chapters in other countries. Drawing inspiration, learning strategies, and forging personal and organizational networks that strengthened the movement overall. This interconnectedness reinforced the idea that African-descended peoples were not isolated victims of oppression, but participants in a shared destiny, bound together by common history, culture, and aspiration, and capable of exerting influence collectively in ways that individual communities alone could not achieve. Through parades, conferences, conventions, and cross-border collaborations, Garvey fostered a sense of belonging and shared purpose, demonstrating the transformative potential of coordinated action on a global scale. Moreover, Garvey's vision emphasized that the practical realization of African repatriation and empowerment required economic development, organizational skill, and moral discipline, reinforcing the principle that liberation could not be handed down but had to be achieved through sustained effort, planning, and collaboration. The establishment of businesses, shipping lines, and cooperative enterprises was as much about training communities in practical skills as it was about building material wealth, serving as tangible demonstrations of what African-descended people could achieve when they harnessed their collective abilities, intellect, and labor in pursuit of self-determined goals. These enterprises connected directly to the UNIA's worldwide network, ensuring that success in one region could serve as a model, a resource, or a source of inspiration for other communities, embedding a culture of achievement, mutual support, and visionary ambition within the global movement. In reflecting upon Garvey's worldwide impact, it becomes clear that his vision of African repatriation and global organization was not merely aspirational, but strategically designed to cultivate networks of empowerment, identity, and influence that could endure beyond the lifespan of any individual leader. By promoting the idea that African-descended people should see themselves as part of a larger, interconnected global community, Garvey created the foundation for subsequent Pan-African movements, inspired leaders across continents, and provided a model for transnational activism that continues to inform discussions of identity, empowerment, and collective agency to this day. His work illustrates that vision, when combined with organizational skill, strategic communication, and unyielding moral conviction, can transcend borders and generations, leaving a legacy that is both tangible and profoundly inspirational, a testament to the enduring power of purpose-driven action on a global scale. As the final chapter of Marcus Garvey's extraordinary journey unfolded, the world bore witness to a man whose vision, courage, and unrelenting dedication to the empowerment of African-descended peoples transcended his lifetime, leaving an indelible mark on history and inspiring generations long after his passing. Garvey's life, characterized by both triumph and tragedy, concluded in London on June 10, 1940, at the age of 53, a figure who had dedicated every waking moment to the struggle for dignity, self-reliance, and unity among black communities across the globe. Though he left this world without ever seeing the full fruition of his dreams, without having set foot on the African soil he envisioned as a homeland for his people, the seeds he planted through his leadership, his speeches, his organizations, and his bold initiatives germinated over time, growing into movements, ideas, and institutions that continue to influence and empower today. The posthumous recognition of Garvey's legacy, culminating in a pardon granted in 2025 for the 1923 mail fraud conviction that many have argued was politically motivated, stands as a poignant symbol of both delayed justice and the enduring impact of his work. Over a century after his conviction, the acknowledgement that Garvey's prosecution was unjust serves not only as a vindication of his personal integrity, but also as a broader testament to the significance of his contributions to the global struggle for racial equality, cultural pride, and Pan-African unity. This long overdue pardon forces us to reflect on the challenges faced by visionary leaders who confront entrenched systems of power, reminding us that transformative ideas often meet resistance, suppression, and misunderstanding in their own time, even when those ideas ultimately prove to be foundational for social progress and human dignity. Marcus Garvey's life story is a narrative that intertwines brilliance with hardship, vision with betrayal, and perseverance with the constant threat of opposition from both within and outside the communities he sought to uplift. From his early recognition of racial injustices in Jamaica, to his heart-wrenching experiences witnessing the exploitation of African workers abroad, to his tireless efforts to build institutions such as the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the Black Star Line, Garvey demonstrated a rare combination of practical action, ideological clarity, and unyielding moral conviction. He endured sabotage, mismanagement, and the betrayal of associates, and yet, even in moments of profound personal and organizational difficulty, he continued to articulate a vision of African dignity, pride, and self-determination that resonated across continents. His steadfastness in the face of these trials serves as a powerful lesson for all who seek to create meaningful change, that the measure of leadership lies not in the absence of obstacles, but in the courage and tenacity with which one confronts them. The global reach of Garvey's ideas, his promotion of African repatriation, and his establishment of UNIA divisions in over 22 countries exemplify the extraordinary scale of his ambitions and the strategic acumen with which he pursued them. By fostering a sense of shared purpose and identity among African-descended populations worldwide, Garvey helped transform the narrative surrounding Black identity, instilling pride, self-respect, and a vision of empowerment that challenged prevailing notions of inferiority imposed by colonial and racial hierarchies. Leaders such as Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and countless others drew inspiration from Garvey's philosophy, carrying forward his message in new contexts and ensuring that the legacy of his struggle reverberated across decades and movements. The reverberations of his work remind us that meaningful change is rarely confined to a single era or locale. Rather, it spreads through time, influencing hearts, minds, and societies in ways that continue to unfold long after the originator of those ideas has departed. The lessons from Garvey's life are multifaceted and timeless. He teaches the power of vision, the importance of self-belief, and the transformative potential of collective action rooted in shared identity and purpose. He reminds us that cultural pride and economic independence are inseparable from political empowerment, and that achieving lasting change requires courage, resilience, and the willingness to challenge both external oppression and internalized limitations. Garvey's story also underscores the need for historical justice, the necessity of revisiting past wrongs, and the value of acknowledging contributions that were denied recognition in their own time. The 2025 posthumous pardon is a symbolic affirmation that, even when justice is delayed, truth, perseverance, and moral clarity have the capacity to prevail. As we reflect on Marcus Garvey's remarkable life and enduring influence, it is essential to recognize that his legacy is not merely a historical account to be admired from a distance, but a living source of inspiration that calls on each of us to engage actively with the world around us, to cultivate pride in our identities, and to strive for meaningful contributions that uplift our communities. By embracing Garvey's ideals: unity, self-reliance, dignity, and global consciousness, we honor his vision and participate in the continuation of a movement that transcends generations, continents, and social boundaries. His life challenges us to ask how we, in our own time, can act with courage and integrity to confront injustice, promote empowerment, and build a more equitable world for those who come after us. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this journey into the extraordinary life of Marcus Garvey. If you found inspiration in this story, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss the chance to explore more stories of individuals who shaped the course of history and left an enduring impact on humanity. Your engagement helps ensure that the voices and legacies of visionaries like Garvey continue to resonate and inspire. And may the courage, pride, and vision of Marcus Garvey inspire your own journey tomorrow and always.